Hello and welcome to another episode of the Type Tools podcast. I'm here with expert Scott Fishbuck, and I am Jacie. And today we are going over one of the topics that when I was first introduced to typology, I was introduced by a very good friend of mine, and she was really excited about it. And I was like, okay, but why does this matter? What is the point of learning this? How does it help people? Why is it relevant to me? Why do I care? So that's what we're talking about today.
Because there's a billion things you could spend your time learning, and you don't have enough time to learn everything. So, kind of knowing why typology is useful or how it might be useful could be a first obstacle in spending time delving into all the stuff.
Before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone there is a link in the description box with a little handout that will talk you through the different types and the functions and the definitions of things we're talking about today. So super helpful to have that handy if you're following along and you're kind of newer to typology. So my first question is really because we did a mistyping episode about how a lot of people do the online tests and they might get mistyped. This is kind of a two-part question. One, why does typology matter? Like, what's the benefit of knowing my type? But two, how accurate does my test result or my typing need to be in order for me to find it useful?
That's a great question. And over the years, my answer to this has shifted. At first, I would have thought the only way to orient your life is to have the right type, and we have to get the perfect label and the perfect diagnosis. And what I've slowly learned over time is that moving in the direction of self-discovery at all is helpful. And then there are best practices associated with that process, because at the end of the day, you're the one with your mind, you're the one with your goals. So for instance, if you figured out that you are more concrete, and for people that have the sheet, that's the S types. And by that, I mean more concrete than you are abstract, meaning you have a preference for literal physical stuff. So for reference, Jacie and I are both abstract, and the way we're going to talk is we're going to talk about concepts, and we're going to talk about theories, and we're going to talk about how those things connect. And then the more concrete people are going to listen to it, and they'll be like, yeah, but what's real about this conversation? And why don't we have more names, dates, statistics, hands-on experience, useful stories? Where's the real? If you can figure out your more of the concrete type or more of the abstract type, just that single thing can help you explain to people in a situation. So let's say your brain is dying inside because we haven't talked about a single physical thing. I'm just kind of thinking about a scenario where I have a friend who is dominant concrete. He's ISTJ, and I didn't know that this was happening, but three of the friend group are more intuiting. And I found out probably 3 months later that anytime he'd walk into one of our conversations, he'd be like almost shaking inside because it was so annoying to listen to. Because we're just talking about, for him, nothing. We're just talking about nothing. Those aren't real things. And that's kind of what happens when a dominant sensory person hops into an abstract conversation. And then when an abstract person hops into a concrete conversation, this is how it looks. They're talking about the specific process by which they make the food, or they're talking about the specific process that they go through in a cookie recipe. They're talking about Sarah and John and all of the little tiny social considerations in their life. And what I would find when I would get into those conversations is my mind would start evaporating. And really, what that represents, it's just an inability to hop into this other mindset. And I've discovered, as I've learned to just have a fully concrete conversation with a concrete person. So asking specific details. Okay, so we're going to talk about your schedule when you get home. And Okay, so what do you do immediately when you get in the door? Okay, well, I'm going to put my backpack down and I'm going to put my shoes by the door, and then I'm going to spend 15 minutes on the couch, and then I'm going to begin my preparation for my dinner because I like using a crock pot. And in the crock pot, I'm going to put carrots, potatoes, and chicken breast, and then I'm going to put in salt and I'm going to put in pepper. This is a very concrete conversation that I'm talking about right now.
So if your brain is melting like mine, you might be abstract.
Yeah, exactly. And does that mean that And so, but concrete people are like, this is what conversations are. This is what they're for. This is why we have them, because it's utterly based in physical reality. There's nothing abstract about it, and that feels right. That feels good. And then the intuitive people are like, well, when can we talk about the future? When can we talk about my vision? When can we talk about my goals? When can we talk about what the nature of existence is? When can we do this? And understanding where you are just in that one dimension can really help a lot. And that's not typing you, that's finding one angle in how you see the world. And then you can start realizing these differences between you and the other people, not thinking summarily, oh, those are the dumb people, and they talk about the dumb things, which usually is how both sides kind of see each other, which is this is a dumb conversation. And both of them think that. Both sides of that think the same thing. So when we're talking about type, like you could, okay, I'm an INTJ, I'm an ISTJ, I'm an ENTJ. Okay, well that's a whole bunch of things. But even if you knew whether you were concrete or abstract, you would have a better idea of what to expect when you walk into these different situations, and you would know better how to handle them. And that's just one thing. And so what I've learned is it's good enough to know one aspect of your personality better than you did before.
We should definitely do an episode on the preferences. So the preferences, if you have the handout, you'll see the chart of the 16 personalities, and the preferences can help you narrow down which personality you are or that you're dealing with because they're dyad. So what Scott was just talking about was abstract versus concrete. If you can figure out which one you are, that narrows it down to half of the remaining personalities. And each time you do that, each time you identify a preference, it narrows it down by half. So, kind of flipping the conversation to cognitive functions, like I'm an INTJ, and there are other types that share the same cognitive functions that I do. So, if I were mistyped as a ESFP, how helpful would that be?
So this is interesting because so in this case, the ESFP is essentially the inverse of the INTJ. So INTJ is NITEFISE, and those are their cognitive functions. That's the way that they sort of orient what they're thinking about. So just slowing it down. NI, intuitive, TE, thinking, FI, feeling, and SE, sensing. And they're in that order. And as you go down that stack, there's less attention provided to it. Now, in ESFP, we'll pause. ESFP, extroverted sensing at the top. So literally the opposite of the INTJ. And then FI, so more feeling than the INTJ. And then TE, and that's a little closer but less than the INTJ, and then NI at the bottom. And so what you'll notice there is it's all the same functions but flipped. And so if you're an INTJ and you mistype as an ESFP, the reason why that might happen is because the INTJ probably wants to be better at the physical environment. So the mistype may not actually be an issue, because if the goal was to become more like an ESFP, for instance, if I were in a coaching call and I'm working with an INTJ mistyping as an ESFP, but they don't know they're mistyping, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I can infer from that mistype that what they're seeking is to grow in their sensory competence and like spend a little more time in the real, in the now, in the moment. And and so usually what that represents in the specific case of an INTJ and an ESFP is the INTJ is trying to enjoy life. The INTJ is trying to get more joy out of life. And the way that they would do that is working on their bottom two functions. So if right now their goal is to become more like an ESFP, then what they might be doing is sort of subjectively switching the way they would answer things in order to appear more like the thing that they're working towards. And at the end of the day, it would be better if they figured out they were an INTJ. But if I'm running into a strong mental block and I'm an ESFP, what I've learned to do is just roll with it and recognize that we're all trying to develop in ways that are hard for us. So something like that would be like I'm an INTP and I'm typing as an ESFJ, which is, if you know those types, that's crazy. Those two types are not the same. But what that might mean is, for instance, with the INTPs, that they're really trying hard to get their schedule figured out and figuring out where they fit socially and how to be a better contributor to their tribe and learning how to take all these ideas and concepts and turn them into something beautiful that's socially connecting. And I understand that this is kind of word salad. At this point, I've kind of forgotten what the question was. So I guess what I'm trying to illustrate in a really broad swath here is we're all figuring out things about ourselves. And sometimes that means making small errors and that is okay. It is okay to mistype because we're slowly moving towards a more complete awareness of ourself. And so that process, I think, is the more important than getting the right type.
Okay, so let's say that I think I'm pretty solid on my type, either through a test or I got feedback or I worked with you and you typed me. Now that I know what type I am, how can I most immediately apply that information in a like real way? Like what would be your first step? You meet with me, you tell me I'm an INTJ. How do I actually use that information?
Well, first you would sort of, and I like orienting it towards your unique gift or your natural ability, your unique ability, however you want to phrase it. So recognizing one, that you are not exactly the same as the people around you, which on some level everyone gets. Everyone understands that. And so there might be different needs that the person has, and so those can be resolved with typing. And usually, one of the first obstacles is, do I understand myself? And usually you kind of understand it. You understand yourself enough. But the big issue is I feel misunderstood by other people. And I don't know how to integrate, right? Because people don't do a coaching call unless there's an issue, unless there's a challenge or an issue. Why would you go on a personality or self-discovery journey if there weren't something that you were looking for? And a lot of times it's either self-understanding or two, how can I be understood better? Depending on what I sort of suss out as the core need, it'll change what would be the most useful or applicable thing. Sometimes it's letting yourself realize that you live and breathe and are more capable in a specific domain. So basically your top functions, and that those are easy for you and they're much more difficult for other people. So essentially generating a division between, even though this is easy for me, this is not easy for other people. And so as a result, this can be a gift that I give, this can be a contribution that I provide, this can be something helpful to people near me. And then the other one that you'd want to do is figure out, because the more you understand yourself, the more easily you can communicate your needs, desires, hopes, dreams, etc. to people around you. So it's going to start with self-discovery, and then it's going to shift into connecting and sharing that self-discovery with the people around you. And so what that can result in is a, now that you understand these things about yourself and then understanding the people that you're trying to connect with, you can integrate those things better. Like if you want the watch to work, a lot of cogs have to align properly. And so it's figuring out how to get everything moving smoothly. And in terms of a more concrete answer, a lot of times that's going to be talking about your blind spots and it's going to be talking about your hero function. So for instance, if it were an ISTJ, we'll just kind of stick to the ISTJ theme. If it's an ISTJ, those guys are better than everyone at stability, routine, duty, and efficiency, and in that order. What that means is whether or not the people around them appreciate or understand it, that is that's what they're giving and providing to the people around them. And so if they know that, they can say, "Hey, listen, boss. Hey, listen, husband, wife, or friend. This is the thing that I'm good at. Will you let me do that?" Question mark. And then it's up for negotiation. And then alternatively, they can shift their approach, which would take work and effort in order to accommodate the people around them. Let's say it's a an ENTJ and an ISTJ, and they're in a business partnership. Well, the ENTJ is going to want to be more visionary, and they're going to have objectives, and they're going to have things they're going to want to accomplish. But those all represent specific processes. The way that those things will happen is if actual things are done in the physical environment, and those things must be maintained in order for it to happen. So if we want the business, let's say the business is construction. Okay, so the ENTJ is like, okay, I want to spend more time figuring out where the construction sites are, and I want to negotiate deals, and I want to figure out what our brand is, and I want to learn all the ways in which this business can grow rapidly. And then the ISTJ can go in and clean up those processes. So it could look like, okay, this is the standard operating procedure for when we begin construction at a new site. And these are the checklists that we have to cover in order for this broader overarching vision to be accomplished. And so that's just one pairing. And then knowing your unique ability, knowing what you're gifted at, can allow that communication process to occur a lot more quickly with less friction.
So I know when I first learned I was an INTJ, I got really into the letters, like what I means, what N means, what T means, what J means. And it wasn't until later that I really understood that was like not really the best way to understand what my type was. And if you guys watch our compatibility episode, we go over the different cognitive functions and it's also on the handout. So if you're kind of getting lost in this conversation, those are two good resources to look at. But how does understanding your cognitive functions really help you understand your strengths, weaknesses, and identify those blind spots?
Do you want to use a specific type example?
Yeah.
Let's use ESTP. Okay, so ESTP leads with extroverted sensing, then introverted thinking, then extroverted feeling, then introverted intuition. So they lead with extroverted sensing, which means most of their attention is naturally oriented to the moment. So they're going to be the first responders, they're going to be the quick actors, they're going to know what to do tactically in an environment. They're not going to have to try to be good at that. They'll naturally be good at it. They know how to flow with an environment and handle it methodically and quickly whenever they feel like it. It's like breathing. That's the thing that they know how to do. So, knowing cognitive functions now, again, it sort of goes back to knowing yourself. So, figuring out what extroverted sensing is can be beneficial because now you can label what you are and what you're good at and knowing what extroverted feeling is. So why would an ESTP want to be liked and want to get along? What like I'm a tough, strong man, says the ESTP, or I'm a strong, capable woman. Why do I feel this need to be accepted by other people and liked? Well, extroverted feeling. Oh, interesting. Okay, so extroverted feeling means I care about how I come off and connect with the other people. And that's kind of extroverted sensing mixed with extroverted feeling. Extroverted sensing is about giving an experience, and extroverted feeling is about being enjoyed, appreciated, and liked. And so recognizing those functions and how that connects to your behavior can be really beneficial. And then also what I notice, especially with ESTPs, is sometimes they can get in this act, go, move mindset, which can make long-term goals challenging to hold on to and to achieve because they're more interested in acting than they are in orienting their actions to an overarching vision. And so if they can recognize that this is a challenge, that they're essentially learning, and sort of a visual you could think of is a hamster on a wheel that is just churning. They're the fastest, most impressive hamster on a wheel you've ever seen. And if you watch that hamster, you'd be like, goodness, that is incredible how fast they can move on the wheel. But then you get the sense that they're just doing the same thing over and over. And the reason that is because they're tactically responding to their environment at every time, but not necessarily orienting it to an overarching introverted intuition personal path. So let's say you're this ESTP and you're like, oh, okay, I can see how I've done the same thing a whole bunch of times. Now I can talk to an INTJ, or I can talk to someone who is better at helping me chart my future course, and you outsource that to someone who's more gifted and capable about providing that input to you. And then you're super strong and capable and fast and wise and able, and you're able to now put that effort and work into a course that's going to make your life better. So essentially knowing yourself and knowing your functions lets you label things. And then once you label them, you can figure out, okay, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to work with? And then you also know why you're working with them and why you're talking to them. This is the reason for this interaction. And then you can use all your natural gifts and abilities to rapidly pursue these goals that someone else helped you realize for yourself. These are your goals. And then they're being made more concrete and real. And then you can have this battle plan to rapidly increase and improve your life.
So, kind of speaking more to the relationship piece, how does typing help relationships? Like, do you have any stories about how someone knowing their type and someone else's type improved a relationship?
Yeah. So there's an INTP I know, and as everyone knows, life gets complicated, life gets crazy. So he has a son who's an ESTP, and we've typed all his family. And so he was noticing that his son was struggling in school, and not every type is built for the way that our education system is set up. And so his son was smart, and he would struggle in school because he's like, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? What's the point of this? And the ISTPs are really interested in practical application of physical skills.
You said he was an ESTP. Is he an ISTP?
ISTP. And yes, he is an ISTP, and then his dad's a INTP. From our conversations, what he started doing was asking his son for help with physical tasks. And as an INTP, they have extroverted intuition second. And so what they're looking for is, how do I build a better future for the people that I care about? That's how it works out for an INTP. And so he was looking at his son, he was seeing his struggles, seeing his challenges, and also wanting to connect and have a better relationship with him and place him in a position where he could demonstrate skills, competence, and ability in domains that made sense for him. Yeah, not necessarily in the way that society has told him to perform, but in the way that he performs naturally, and essentially generating a space for him to succeed clearly at not only things that are helpful and beneficial, but also things that he's capable and gifted at doing.
So, in this example, the INTP is an abstract type and his son is a concrete type. And I know you've spoken before about how that difference is a really extreme one that tends to stand out in terms of relational conflict is like if you have an abstract type and a concrete type. So in this example specifically, it probably was difficult for them to find a point of connection.
Yeah, and because the INTP wants to spend time with their thoughts and learning new concepts and spending time by themselves and working out complex problems and figuring them out. And then the ISTP wants to think about things and then do them, and do them with other people to a certain degree. So his son was spending time playing a lot of first person shooters, which requires mechanical aptitude and ability. But ultimately, unless you go the streaming route and you're hyper successful, it's likely not going to translate into, tangible monetary skills. And so what he would do is anytime something would break on his car, anytime something would mechanically break at his home, he would ask his son, "Hey, this is a problem I'm having. How do we fix it?" And then his son would be like, "Yes, these are my favorite kind of problems. Thank you." And so it would be like, "How do you fix the remote on the garage? How do you put the air condition filter on the make and model of the family minivan? How do you do all these things?" And the INTP had this list of things that needed to get done, but didn't necessarily have the mechanical aptitude to do them, or the joy that the ISTP had in accomplishing them. So his son would watch YouTube videos, figure it out, and then go do it. And then they would spend time, and the INTP gets to be like, "Wow, you're so good at this. That's so incredible." And as a result, their relationship built and built. And so now his son feels capable and able, and he gets to have these situations where he can feel competent and shine, which weren't previously being provided to him in the environment that he was. So the INTP got to generate the space in which his ISTP son could feel competence and capability. And that helped them bond.
And does that extend beyond like personal relationships? Like, have you seen this work in workplaces as well?
Yeah, yeah. So in the past, I've spent a couple years working in more blue collar type situations, which is not usually what INTPs do, but it's certainly a place where INTPs can develop the concrete skill sets that to sort of stabilize their desire to make sense of everything, of the world and all of its confusing angles. And this lets them get to work and make something real. So so fence building or construction or fixing the car. These are all things that the INTPs wouldn't naturally get into, but if they did, it would be really good for them. And so I would work with these concrete types, and they'd look at me and they'd be like, "Why? He looks physically able. He looks like he's really, why is this taking so much time for him to figure out?" And then at the point where I began to figure out all these processes, so for instance, building the fence, learning how to use the staple gun, learning how to pound the posts, understanding depth, understanding how to line up the fence properly, making sure all these things are in place, understanding how to communicate with the homeowner, understanding what to do with livestock and where to put them when we're working on a fence. All of these things I slowly figured out. And then once I developed a level of competence in that domain, I could start suggesting potential pivots about the way we were approaching it holistically that would speed outcomes. So I might say, "All right, well, we could make this small change to the fence, but it would take an additional 5 hours. Like you're paying me to do this work, and but 5 hours of work would take from your time and the homeowners bottom line, and we have a lineup of projects that we're working on." And then I would provide it to him as a potential thing. And sometimes he'd be like, "No, it's really important that this is perfect and we have to get it right." And that was one of his values. He was an ISFP, so we wanted everything to be beautiful and perfect. And efficiency was not quite as important. But if you want to have a highly profitable business, you do need to sometimes let go of perfect and accept good. What I saw myself doing was noticing the speed and pace at which we were producing the outcome that the homeowner was interested in, and then avoiding huge amounts of time, like 5 to 6 hours, to, for instance, reset an entire line of posts when in reality we would probably only marginally increase it, and the homeowner didn't care because it was a fence for cattle. It wasn't on the front where they'd be concerned with aesthetics. And then sometimes what I would notice, if the client was more abstract, he'd be giving them all these details, and I could just see their eyes glazing over. And I was like, "Okay, this is a personality type that you don't need to give all the details to because they don't want them." And then he learned to not spend 45 minutes explaining the technicals, he would spend 5 minutes. And he had different labels and words for all the things, but he slowly started figuring out what he needed to give to the people so that they felt like they were getting what they needed.
The inference there is that like concrete types, so the S types tend to gravitate more towards blue collar jobs.
Yeah, yeah, because it's physical. You can do a thing and see the thing and work on the thing and watch it happen. And that's the space that concrete now that's more of the SPs. That's more of the extroverted sensing types. SJs can do those type of work, but they're better at back end administrative tasks. They're better at secretarial administrative type tasks, which are still concrete, but more preservational, organizational, and less tactical, less hands-on. And but ultimately they're both concrete oriented sides of a job, but they're different in how they look. So yes, I would say both concrete leans blue collar, but blue collar tends in my experience to be almost like probably 80% SPs and then 20% of everything else.
Interesting. So, is there anything that you feel people commonly misunderstand or misuse about typing? Like, what pisses you off the most?
Well, again, so this has been an area of personal discovery. And what I would, because I get OCD about, well, you're not this type. And they'd be like, I am this type. And for years, I'd be like, well, I guess I can't work with them. And what I found is to let go of my perfectionism in that regard, understanding that not only can I be wrong, although again, given my personality type, I'm pursuing intellectual perfection, even though I also recognize that it's impossible because you can always expand your capacity to think and analyze. But in the process, what I've discovered is you just want to move them forward. You just want to move them forward. And so letting go of demanding or enforcing my point of view has been really helpful. So letting the client lead, and then if they can't tell me what they want specifically, I can figure out what they want with extrovert intuition. That's what extrovert intuition is doing. It's continuously figuring out, well, what does this person want? What does this person want? And then it's pretty capable. So I can figure out, okay, this person at this moment needs to feel or needs to know that they're this personality type. And then I can hold in my mind, I might be wrong about this, even though I've done this thousands of times and I've honed this ability. But at the end of the day, I could be missing critical information about typing. And and then recognizing that what they're interested in is building their business. What they're interested in is fostering a relationship with other people. And then I can say, we can hold off on placing you in in a category if that's going to get in the way of pursuing your goals. So if the aim for them in the call is foster relationships and they don't either trust me or believe that I know enough to type them, then we can pause. We can pause and table that because maybe they need to think about it. Maybe they need time to figure it out over time. And let's just work on these relationships. And then I can type their family and then I can say, okay, well, have you tried doing this? And then there's multiple problems going on and their resolution, sometimes you have to let something pause in order to move forward with getting things accomplished.
And I think just like for the listeners, one of the coolest things about working with you is you can kind of remotely type people through other people's experience of them. So, for example, if we were to type my family, you don't need to meet my family, you just need me to describe my family. So working with you, it's like you can learn about yourself, but it also improves the relationships around you because you have I mean, you're able to do that, which is incredible and very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, and what I like about it is you can help. You can help. You can solve the thing. the thing that they're frustrated about. And what I love about the typology thing is people are complicated. And it's not just personality type, it's upbringing, it's culture, it's personal vision and desires. And they're all kind of mixed. They're mixed together. Even if you run into a specific type, their goals and aims might be completely different. Now, there is going to be general trends and preferences with a type, but how they want to use them and how they want to go with that, that shifts a lot. And so even if I had a clientele entirely composed of a single personality type, only 60% would be something in common, and then the other 40% would be what they're wanting to do with their skills, what, right? So even if you went the direction of SPs, so they want to work with their hands. Okay, well, how do you want to do that? Do you want to make cakes? Do you want to build fences? Do you want to own a construction company? Do you want to use your ESTP abilities to read a room and do sales? Do you want to build a business? Do you want to perform physically? Do you want to be a dancer and that's your profession? Do you want to be an artist? These are all different domains and they're all using their physical capacities for success, and they're using them in very different ways. Yeah, it's about figuring out their gifts and abilities and orienting them in a way where they receive personal fulfillment in the achievement of their goals and desires. They have less struggles in the ways that they're less aware and more blind. And essentially the goal is just to solve your problems, make things better. And that's a process, and you'll have new problems as you level up, and they're going to look different. And sort of what remains is you're wired a specific way and you do things a specific way, but what you do with that is totally up to you.
Well, if you want to work with Scott to learn the tools to solve your problems, you can book a session over at toolswithscott.com. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Bye, guys.